Great to be back after a month of holidays. For all my friends out there, please don't forget to like and share. It helps spread the work of the Lighthouse Project, bringing Torah to masses. Also, as I always mention, I have longhand notes. So please, in the past, all those sitting around the table already, I have your emails out there. If there's someone who I don't have your email yet, just post it onto the link when we post the live feed, and I'll go ahead and add you and let you know that you're added. Okay, so let's get into this. Today's title, the Moonwalk. Who knows how to do the Moonwalk? I don't know how to do the Moonwalk. Okay, that'll be next class. So, let's talk about the Moonwalk. The Moonwalk is a specific famous dance. It became like the signature of Michael Jackson. Just that you know, it was not invented by Michael Jackson. It was actually invented by Jeffrey Daniel from the R&B group called Shalamar. And it's called a Moonwalk. It's a very interesting dance. Basically, your legs are moving in a format where it looks like you're walking forward, but actually your feet are propelling your body backwards. And that's the famous Moonwalk. So the title of tonight's class is Lech Lecha, the Moonwalk. So why? So as you know, we always deal with a modern day issue. Why are we talking about this? It's nice to have Kabbalah and nice to have Chassidus, but the signature of the Rebbe's dance of Torah is always Hamaisa Hua Ikar. Give me action. How does this impact our daily lives as Jews in our spiritual level and as Jews in our physical level? That's what we want to know. So the connection, I believe, is quite obvious. Many of us go through life as if we're dancing the Moonwalk. We do actions, we make plans, we set goals, we're looking to move forward. It looks, if you look at a to-do list day by day, it looks like we're moving forward, and yet our balance sheet often shows us that in some areas, many areas, sometimes most areas, we're actually not moving forward. In some areas, we're actually proving to be moving backwards. Thus in life, it seems to be that we're doing the Moonwalk and we're getting frustrated. You know, we listen to another inspirational speaker, go to another workshop, we're having new motions and movements of the legs to move forward, and again, the balance sheet seems to show that we're not moving forward. Again, we're moving backwards. So what we're going to do in this class is have a spiritual exploration based on mystical teachings of the Moonwalk, and from it we're going to learn how to actually dance forward and freely in our lives. So let's jump into our Torah portion. Okay? Our Torah portion begins, the name of our Torah portion is Lech Lecha. What does Lech Lecha mean? And God told Abraham, at that point his name was Abraham, not Abraham, but we'll call him Abraham because once he was named Abraham, unless you're reading it actually in the Torah, we're told that we don't call him anymore Abraham. Unlike Jacob and Israel, we use both names, even though Jacob's name was changed to Israel. Avrahom's name you don't change. Avrohom is only Avram. No one names his kid Avram. So we're going to refer to him tonight in the class as Avrohom. But just at the time, you should know, chronologically speaking, in his lifetime, he was still Avram at the point. But either way, and God tells Avraham what? Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha ma'artzecha u'meladetcha me'bet avicha. Lech means go. What does the word Lecha mean? Literally, the word Lecha means to you. However, Rashi immediately tells us that what does it mean here, go to you? What it means is, go for your sake. And Rashi says that God promised Abraham three things. If he's willing to go, leave his birthplace, his land, his birthplace, and the house of his father. And what are those three things? Rashi tells us that he will receive a child, he will receive fame, and he will receive wealth. Right? That's what it says over there. But on a Kabbalistic level and on a Chassidus level, we're focusing on the actual literal translation. Lecha, to you. Lech Lecha, go to you. And what that means is, from a Kabbalistic point of view and a Hasidic point of view, that the journey is one where Avrohom, and obviously being a story in the Torah, it now becomes a message to all the offspring of Avrohom. Lech Lecha, go to you, which means go to your very core essence. You're going to forgive me for a moment, but we're actually taught in the Torah that there were two brothers, Yisachar and Zvulun, the two tribes. Yisachar sponsored the study. Zvulun sponsored the study. Yisachar actually did the studying. They were partners. And we're always taught that you put Zvulun before Yisachar, because if not for the sponsorship, we wouldn't be here tonight. So I'm really sorry that I didn't do this earlier. Tonight's learning is generously sponsored by DJ Acquisitions, Yisachar Zvulun sponsorship, and for the Refuah Shlema ben Menachem Mendel ben Sarabatya and Devorah Fega bat Rezel. Okay. So I got to do two things in one shot. I got to talk to you about Zvulun, and I also had the opportunity to express to you my wonderful ADD. So now let's get back focused. How are you?
Somebody's sitting.
You on? Over here.
Okay, I'm going to get the chair now.
Okay. So back to what we're talking about. In the teaching of Hasidus, we focus literally on the words Lech Lecha. Oh, bring another chair. We have Lech Lecha, which actually means go to you. And Chassidus is going to say, yes, it's the journey to the center of your being, your core essence. Now, in Kabbalah and Chassidus, this journey to our core essence is explained in two forms. One is called Milamala Lemata, from above to below, and the other one is called Milamata Lemala, from below to above. Thus, we're going to read now the itinerary of this journey. The Torah gives us an itinerary. We're going to read the itinerary and first explain it from above to below, and then from below to above. When we talk about from above to below, we're going to define as follows. The word Artzecha, from your land. That's the first thing the verse says. First stop, Mi Artzecha, go from your land. What does that mean? When we talk about it in the personal journey to the center of self, Artzecha is used in the language of our sages as two different meanings, which both have pretty much the same expression. One is Ratzon, and one is Ratz. Ratzon means the power of will. Thus, we're telling Abraham, go from your power of will. And the second teaching is Ratz, which in Hasidus has the same definition, because why do I run to something? It's because I'm doing it willfully. I'm doing it with pleasure. So, Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha. First you go from the power of will. Then you go to Moladetcha. What's Moladetcha? Birthplace. Where's the place of birth? The place of birth, in Tanya chapter 3, it tells us, the place of birth is the intellects. Father and mother is Chachma and Bina, wisdom and understanding. Dat is the consummation and the personalization. And from that comes what? Emotions. I feel what I feel because I perceive the way I perceive. Fear of the unknown is a fool's fear. Love of that who you don't know is fatuity. It's not love. Oh, I love her. Would you ever meet her? I saw her actually across the hall. You don't love her. You're infatuated with her. So thus the true birthplace, Moladetcha, where's the birthplace of the offspring, which is the emotions, is the intellect. So that's the second stop on the itinerary. And what's the third stop on the itinerary? Umibet avicha, and from your father's home. And over here, in this format, we describe what does your father's home mean. The home of your parents is the children. That's the true definition of home. And thus we're talking about emotions. So in this itinerary, the way we just explained it, you're going from the higher to the lower, from the power of will to the emotions. Thus in Kabbalah, when we talk about this Lech Lecha, before we personalize it, on the level of Kabbalah, Hasidus personalizes it. On the level of Kabbalah, we're talking about the journey from the infinite light to the finite creation, which happens through the 10 emanations. And thus we talk about the three major categories. Power of will, circular encompassing, intellect, higher emanations, and then you have, it's called the three heads, the intellects, and then you have the seven nether ones, the seven offsprings, which is the emotions. Now, let's take this exact same journey and see the other opinion in Kabbalah. The other opinion in Kabbalah is that we're going milmata lemala, from below to above. Okay? Thus, we're now going to have to redefine this entire concept, going from the lower to the higher. So, in the way you look at it here is, Aretz, land. Land is very often found, is translated as the 10th emanation, kingship. Eretz Yisrael, Knesset Yisrael, refers to the 10th emanation, kingship. Okay? Kingship, we'll soon talk about it, how it plays itself in the human journey, how Hasidus is going to define this Kabbalistic teaching. But first, let's just get it straight. So you have the first level from below above. Eretz now is not the power of will, Ratzon. Rather, it's the receptacle. Eretz, just like the woman, her womb is the power of reproduction because she's kingship. So too the power of reproduction lies in the earth because the earth is kingship. So that's the 10th emanation. From there, you're going to go upwards. What's the next step upwards? You're talking about Maladatcha. Maladatcha here is not the place where things are born, but the offspring. So thus, literally meaning when it says Maladatcha, it means where you were born. It's talking about the person who's born. Thus, we're going to look at it here as the emanations, as the emotions, the offspring, and Bet Avicha, the father's house. The father's house refers to father and mother, that's going to be the intellects. Thus, here you're going from below to above. You're going from the lowest category, the Malchut, to the highest category. We're not talking about the power of will here, which is the encompassing circle. In the way from below above, you reach to the intellects, which is the top of the 10 emanations. Okay? Don't worry if it sounds Kabbalistic, because really what's important is the Hasidic definition of how this affects our life. If you can't draw me the exact anatomy of what goes on up there, don't worry about it. Nicht gefährlich. What we really need to know is how to walk upon the earth like human beings with our heads in the clouds. So, let's go to see how Chassidus says this. In the human infrastructure, we spoke about this many times, when God told the angels, let us make mankind in our image and likeness. God has no image, and therefore it is impossible to be any likeness. Thus, we're not talking about God, we're talking about let's make mankind in our image and likeness, which means the 10 emanations. That's how we explained it. Together with its supernal crown, the power of will, the power of desire, the power of pleasure. So now that we speak about it that way, let's look at what Lech Lecha really means in your life and my life. What does God want from me and you? I understand what he did with the infinite light and the 10 emanations. What does he want from me and you because of that? And the answer is what? The answer is that there's a journey from above below and there's a journey from below above. Let's talk about how we really make transformation in our life. That's the definition of a journey. A journey means to make a difference. You can tour the world, What does Jackie Mason say? The Jews go ahead and they tour the whole world and they know how in every place where the greatest restaurant is. That's not transformation. To really tour the world is to understand the Jewish situation and pick up pearls of wisdom from the traditions of the Jewish community in every place of life, and that transforms you. So what is this journey? This journey of transformation, what are we really being asked to do in the Parshas Lech Lecha? What we're being asked to do is, number one, from above to below. There are some times where transformation begins in your highest faculty, the power of will, which sometimes expresses itself in two ways. I want this, which most often is born from, I don't want that no more. Right? It's all the power of will. I want this and I don't want its opposite. It's really two sides of one coin. Thus, most often when we make a change in our life, it begins with the power of will. And what happens when you have a true power of will? I don't want this life no more. No, if you don't want this life, what do we know the definition of insanity is? Doing things the same way, expecting different results. So obviously we have to do something different. But do I know how to do things differently? I'm following the footsteps of how I was brought up in my environment. Thus, the next step, when I really want something, the next step is the intellect. The next step is I need to pick up knowledge. Thus, the journey is from the power of will to the intellect. And then from the intellect, what is the next step? The next step is into the emotions. if I cannot emotionally accept the person I want to become, it will not happen. It's just that simple. Speak to any salesman, and they will tell you, very few transactions happen because of intellectual perception. They're driven by emotional connection. So there's the power of will. I don't want this life no more. Or, if you're fortunate enough, instead of coming from the negative, I want that type of life. So you start doing research. What does it mean to have that type of life? How do I get to that type of life? And from there goes the third step. Because if it's just a fatuity, if it's just like, yeah, in Spanish they say, ojalá. When you talk to someone about realness and they tell you, ojalá, it means like, okay, I'll see you in Epcot Center. That's what it basically means. So therefore, there has to be the true emotional, tangible connection. I can emotionally accept the image I desire to become. That's from above to below in the inner journey of transformation. How does it work from below above? So there's a saying, fake it until you make it. What does kingship represent in the human infrastructure? It represents the soul's garments of thought, speech, and action. You'll read many books. I remember one of the books I read, it told a story, I'm sorry I don't remember the name, of a person who used to be an elevator man in Rockefeller's building and eventually became extremely wealthy. Why? Because he used to show up to work as an elevator man in a three-piece suit. And thus, we're taught, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want to have. Because you fake it until you make it. Here we're working from bottom up. I don't really know, I don't really have a clear picture, but I'm starting to do things that I see other successful people are doing. I'm going to dress the way they dress, I'm going to behave the way they behave, and then again, the actions, the fake it until you make it, has to be accepted by your emotional psyche. If you cannot emotionally embrace the image, the character that you're faking, portraying to be, you're not going to get there. And then ultimately, after the emotions, from the bottom up I'm talking, after the emotions comes the paradigm. You know the famous saying of our sages, wealth is in the mind. A friend of mine once told me this beautiful story, I shared it with you once before. What's the difference between the rich man and the poor man? The rich man buys a shlappa for 2 ruble, brand new. A year later, he sells it to the poor man for 1 ruble. At the end of the day, how much did each one pay for the shlappa? 1 ruble. The difference is the rich man had a new hat and the poor man had an old hat. Because the power of wealth is in the mind. Thus, the becoming, the transformation of becoming happens when it enters into the mind. So again, from below above, it's fake it until you make it, thought, speech, and action. Work your emotions to accept the character that you're portraying, and then learn the paradigm and become the paradigm of the character you're portraying. That's where the real transformation happens. From above below, it begins in the power of will. Then you go ahead and you do intellectual research to know, and then from there you emotionally accept it. And that's the transformation to becoming from the above below. Thus we now understand this journey that we're talking about of Lech Lecha on a personal level in 2 forms. From above to below, from below to above. Okay? Comes along the Rebbe of blessed memory, and the Rebbe has a very interesting doctrine in his teachings. I've heard it from the Rebbe many times, I've read it in the Rebbe's teachings many times. The Rebbe has a simple doctrine. In the infinite truth of Torah, when one word or one verse has 2 interpretations, there needs to be a connection between the 2. Even though it seems like 2 different opinions, over here they actually are antithetical to their opinions. One says from above below, the other one says from below above. They're opposites. In the Rebbe's world, that can't be. For the truth of Torah demands that when there's two interpretations upon one verse, one commandment, one teaching, there has to be a connection between the two. Thus, the Rebbe now takes us into a whole new level. In the Rebbe's level, we have three journeys. From above to below, below to above, and as they unite and become bilateral. The next thing we have, this is in 1988, the Rebbe delivered this teaching. Another major point of the Rebbe's teaching is that everything we do brings a reward. Thus, we have to find in the reward of our service to God also all three. From above to below, below to above, and the oneness of both of them. Thus, by our working today, serving God through A, B, and C, we're going to have to see that in the reward era, God's relationship to us is going to express itself in the journeys of A, B, and C. Above to below, below to above, and the bilateral oneness of both. Okay? Ready to move on with the lecture? You with me or not? Yeah? Eddie?
Yes, I am.
We have a rule here. Your first class, you can't fall asleep.
No.
I'm playing with you.
9-1.
I love you, man. I'm just playing with you. Okay, let's go further. So, now let's jump into, as you know, in every class, I give you a list of mystical concepts that we're going to need to explore in order to understand the class. Okay? So let's go through the list. Number one, the reward of I will walks. That's incorrect in English. I'm sorry. That's incorrect in English. But in Hebrew, you're going to see walks plural. God saying, I will walks among you. Okay? That's the first concept we have to understand. What does that mean? Number two, what is this concept of doubled letters? And we're taught that it expresses redemption and exponential double strength. Number three, what is the power of teshuvah? Number four, before the paradox begins. And number five, one of the deepest concepts in Chassidus, the moonwalk. I'm kidding. We're going to talk about that. What is the moonwalk? Okay? Okay, let the amazement of Chassidus begin, my friends. So, we're starting with the reward. Because very, very often, the best scientific approach is to see the outcome, and from there we understand the process. If this is the outcome, then what we can start extrapolating what happened in the process. So let's talk about the reward. The reward verse that I'm talking about, which has the three different journeys, we're going to take you to the ending of the book of Leviticus, which we read right before Shavuos, Parsha B'chukoisai. And what does the verse say there? I will walks, again I'm doing the plural, among you and be your God, and you will be my people. Now in English, grammatically, that doesn't work. I will walks. But in Hebrew, the word vehisalachti, our sages learn out from vehisalachti, from the prefixes of that word, three things. Number one, it's continuous. Number two, it's everlasting. And number three, it's multiple, it's plural, with a minimum of two. So what does it mean that Hashem has this halachti, and I will walks with you? Okay? And now here again, we have this double walking of God, and nevertheless, this double walking of God, what are we saying? We're saying that this double walking of God is in one word, the his halachti. So once again, you have three. You have the two walks, and the fact that they're in one word, which means the ultimate oneness of both those. So you have the above to below, below to above again, and the oneness of the bilateral of both those two happening together. Okay? You with me? No?
Yes.
No, I'm serious.
Absolutely.
Okay. we'll talk about this. Okay. It'll all make sense soon. Okay. But really, we have to take a little pause here. The pause is that if we're not going to make this practical and tangible right now, we're really, you'll all shake your heads to me because you're all very polite people, and we'll be in different spheres of reality. So let's make it real. What is this in the practical? What does this mean in my relationship to God? So I want to take you to what is the greatest complexity? Why do the majority of the human race, I'm sorry, I don't mean a little majority, I'm talking about a major majority. Why do the major majority of the human race have a lack of inner peace? inner struggle. We're going in two different directions at the same time. Why does that happen to us? The answer to why it happens to us is actually because from the very source of the process of creation, what happens? We have, thank you very much. Oof, we have someone here that reads my mind. Shkoyach. So what happens here? Let's talk about this. The source of creation, as it's explained in Kabbalah, the first process of the source of creation is the infinite light splits into two dimensions. We have the infinite light as the essence of the infinite light, and then we have the expression of the infinite light. And in Kabbalah, especially the Arizal, Rabbi Luria, he goes ahead and makes sure that we don't mess with the essence of the light. Because the essence of the light is a reflection of the essence of the source of light. And don't mess there, because now you're dealing with heresy. So we don't talk about any tzimtzum or anything happening in the essence of light. It's only in the expression of light. The difference is, the essence of light is God's revealing himself. The expression of the essence of life is in relationship to the other. The essence of light is not here in relationship to the other. It is in relationship to its source. While the expression of light is all about to be received. I'd love to express myself, but if there's no one here to hear me express myself, have I really expressed myself? Thus we have the expression of light. So we already have two. Essence and expression. Within the expression of light, we now have Kabbalah come along and tell us that that in itself also had a split. There's a dualism there. There's the infinite expression of light, known as the Or HaSovev, the circular encompassing infinite light, and there's the Or HaMamala, the permeating linear finite light. And because of this, everything in the universe is made up of two. Body, soul, life source, receptive. The vessel. That is the reason why within us, the microscopic universe, the individual human being is a microscopic universe. And thus we're going to find within the microscopic universe this dualism. Spiritual, physical, altruistic, capitalistic, selfish, selfless. That's the core of the complexity of the human being. And the core of the complexity of the human being is specifically because the entire source of creation was created in this dualism. And this dualism expresses itself as we know it in the human being. What is the soul? The verse says, Kiner Adam Nishmat Adam. Wow. Kiner Hashem Nishmat Adam. Wow. I almost lost my entire certification there. What does the verse say? The verse says that the soul of man is the candle of God. What is the nature of candle? Yearning upwards. What is the primary element of the human body? What does it say God did? He made us primarily out of the sand of the earth. What's the natural flow of the sand of the earth? Heaviness downwards. Thus, even on a metaphysical, on an emotional, on an intellectual, and a spiritual level, the soul is always yearning upwards, and the body is always being heavy downwards. Therefore, you have, from the very DNA of creation and the process of creation, you have this paradox of the moonwalk. You have the paradox of one part of you is yearning upwards, and the other part is yearning downwards. So there's the yearn and the flow. Now I want to share with you, think about this for a moment. If the soul from above is only yearning upwards, and the body from the earth is only from here below, is only flowing downwards, will the two ever meet? No. You'll always have complexity and confusion. But what happens if the soul from the body from below is going to go upwards, and the soul from above is going to come downwards? Then from the very onset of the journey, they're focusing in each other's direction, and ultimately they will meet and unite. And thus you now understand that the paradox of Lech Lecha, the paradox of the two journeys from above to below and below to above, is all expressed because the soul's job is to bring heaven down to earth, and the body's job is to bring earth up to heaven. Physically, in the service of God, this represents itself in Torah study and in mitzvot. What is Torah study? Torah study is the word of God from above coming below to my human mind. What is the actual work of a mitzvah? Take a physical object, be it food, be it parchment, be it a house, and elevate it into spirituality, that it becomes an artifact of mitzvah, of God's will. Thus you have these two journeys. I want to just let you know, in other teachings of the Rebbe and Hasidus, it divides it a little differently. In other places, we don't just have Torah, study, and mitzvah observance, we also have prayer. Why? Because mitzvah observance in many teachings is still part of the above to below. Because who told us what's a mitzvah and what's not a mitzvah? God. Thus a mitzvah also is part of from above to below. It's actually a hostile takeover when I take a physical, egocentric creature and I'm using it as a service to God. That's a hostile takeover of spirituality dominating the physical. In those teachings, the ultimate experience of the from below to above happens only in prayer. Do you know why? What is prayer about? Pure prayer is not about just saying verses of Torah and verses and chapters of Tehillim. That's not what it is. The definition of a biblical commandment to pray to God is bakashat tzrachav, to ask God for your needs. And primarily our needs are physical. I'm not a spiritual person, so if I would all of a sudden become, detached and pray to God that I should have love and fear and everything when I can't pay the bills and my kids can't go to school, that's not real prayer. Real prayer is physical needs. Thus, in other teachings, prayer represents from below to above, and Torah study and mitzvah observance is really from above to below. In this teaching, the Rebbe divides it between Torah and mitzvot, so we're going to stick to it this way. But now you understand why there is that complexity. Now you understand why there is the paradox of the journeys. Because all of the universe is created by that paradox, because that's the way God created it from the infinite light. The essence of light is, I told you, connected to its source. It's going upwards. The expression of light, is going downwards. Within it itself, the infinite remains above. The finite comes down. You see how it keeps on happening? So that paradox of the two-way journey, from below to above to below, is in the genetics of an entire creation. And that expresses itself primarily in the human being, which is the centerpiece of creation in his service to God. Okay? So, let's go on from here. The next step is going to be the concept of the doubled letters. So here's an interesting thing. On this week's Parsha, our sages teach us in the Yalkut, it's actually quoted from Pirkei Rabbi Lecha, and he says there as follows. Rabbi Lecha said, the 5 doubled letters. What are the 5 doubled letters? So when you know Hebrew, you'll know that there are 5 letters that have doubles. Man, tzapach, mem, nun, tzadik, pei, chaf. Only those 5 letters are written differently when it's in the beginning or the middle or the end. Because those letters have what we call final letters. There's the chaf, the final chaf. There's the mem, the shlosa mem, the final mem. There's the nun, there's the lange nun, the final nun. Right? The same thing with the pei and the same thing with the tzaddik. Now, here's an interesting Kabbalistic teaching. Says Rabbi Eliezer that you should know that these 5 doubled letters are connected with terminology of redemption. How do you know? So he picks our verse. To understand what he's saying about our verse, I just have to spell to you the words Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha are both spelled Lamed, final Chaf. So he says, this is the words he says there. The redemption for Avrohom from Ur Kastim, where he was cast into the furnace, How did the redemption come about? When God told Avrohom, Lech Lecha. In other words, the usage of a final chaf, one of the double letters. Thus he says, and he goes on to explain that tzaddik, because Mashiach is called tzemach, he goes on to explain how each one of these 5 letters are used as gateways, terminology of redemption. Thus you know that the double letters are all about redemption. Okay. What does that have to do with our class? For starters, it has to do with the very words we're focusing on. Lech Lecha. The double chaf, all about redemption. Now let's go back to what the Rebbe told us in the beginning, in 1988. What did he say then? You need to understand the reward. And the reward comes about through the service. Right? That's the rule. The rule is that what's Mashiach going to do? According to Kabbalah and Hasidus, all Mashiach is going to do is raise the curtain. Because what's happening is happening by our actions now. We today are building the Bet HaMikdash. We today are transforming the physical world into a spiritual abode. Simply by you having a mezuzah in your house, by you having a Shabbos table, inviting guests, by you having tefillin, mezuzahs, Shabbos candles. So what's happening is happening now, but it's all hidden. When Mashiach comes, he's going to flip the light switch, and then we'll have the revelation of everything we accomplished through our service to God in exile. Thus, if the power of the redemption, in which we quoted from Bechukotai, right? We said the word Hisalachti, the double. So you have from below above below, and the unification of both, the bilateral. Thus we have to say in our service there is the same. Therefore Kabbalah goes on to say you should know that the double letters have to do with the double strength of serving God. In Hebrew it's called Kaflayim Litoshia. Double energy, double strength. What is the double strength? So before I go on to explain that, I just want to share one more concept. In Kabbalah, the word double is not 2 times the quantity. Listen to what's going on here. In Kabbalah, double is not 2 times the quantity. Why? Because 2 times the quantity is just the progressiveness of the single measurement. It's not a double measurement. In true essence, that's not a double measurement. The double measurement is when we talk about an unprecedented exponential leap. So from 1 million to 2 million is not called double the strength. It's still the same. It's the progressiveness of the first million. The first measurement is evolving, it's progressing. But you're still stuck within the same realm of reality. What is the definition of double strength? When we talk about the double letters, which talks about redemption, redemption is not double the quantity of exile. Oh, today we only have this amount of spirituality. When Mashiach comes, we're going to have double the spirituality. Thus we have the double letters, the final, no. What's going to happen when Mashiach comes, I've shared this with you before. When Pinocchio becomes a human child, that's not a double experience of Pinocchio. It's an unprecedented being propelled into a total new realm of infinite reality. So for the finite being to be able to experience the infinite experience, that is double. So when we talk about, we're going to look now for what service of God do we talk about when we talk about the redemption double strength. Till now I learned Torah for 1 hour. Now I'm learning 2 hours. Till now I learned Torah while I was still doodling. Now I put my whole energy into it. That's all the progressiveness of the first measurement to its fullest capacity. That's not a double measurement. Just want to start connecting the dots for you. You understand what's going on here? When we talk about the journey from below to above, and we talk about the journey from above to below, they're both single measurements. That's not called a double measurement. They're 2 different measurements. One is the service of Torah study. The other one is the service of mitzvah observance. And they're both obligations upon the Jewish people. They're both single measures. It's that third level, that exponential infinite propulsion, whatever, being propelled into a total different realm, unprecedented realm of reality, where we're so infinite that the two antithetical directions become one and the same. Now we're talking about double measure. You with me? So each journey, each interpretation of the journey of Lech Lecha in itself are single measurements, even when you're doing them simultaneously. I studied Torah, and then I went out and I did mitzvot. I'm not having a double measure here. What do you mean a double measure? Yeah, I did both. Torah, right? Above, below. Mitzvot, below, above. That's double. No, that's not double. That's two singles. Right? Double measure is an exponential, unprecedented, infinite leap to the point where two singles are becoming one and the same. They all become infinite. If you don't fully understand it, good, because the class is not over. If you understand it, the class is over. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the power of Teshuvah. We find very often, starting with Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 4, Mishnah 11, we have over there the terminology, which is used very often. It's used in brachas, in the name of Rava, and over here we're going to say it. It says as follows: Tshuva umasim tovim. What do these words mean? Teshuvah means repentance or return. Masim tovim means good deeds. So our sages tell us you should know that Teshuvim umasim tovim become a shield against all prosecuting angels. That's what he's talking about in Pirkei Avot. Question: Masim tovim means mitzvot. Why do you need to have a prerequisite of Teshuvah? Teshuvah is one thing. Masim tovim is another thing. Masim tovim doesn't depend upon Teshuvah. Quite the contrary. Coming back from sin depends on Teshuvah. To be able to do Masim tovim, you don't have to do Teshuvah. Every person has that obligation to do Masim tovim. Even if you just did a sin. You just ate pork. So what do you think? You have to wait now for 30 days before you can study Torah? No. You have to do Teshuvah for the sin. But Masim tovim happens immediately. So why does the sages always line it up as if it's a prerequisite? Teshuvah u'masim tovim. The prerequisite to do Masim tovim is Teshuvah. To understand this, we need to understand another concept. There's an interesting teaching. In Kabbalah, we're taught that Mashiach is coming to bring the righteous to the experience of Teshuvah. Why? Because the two journeys of Torah study and of mitzvah observance, a tzaddik can do. The righteous person can do. Teshuvah, only a sinner can do. Yeah, there's the mystical teachings that say that the word chet doesn't just mean sin, it means incomplete. And every finite human is incomplete, no matter how good he does it in the face of the infinite. That's all pshetlach. But if you look in the laws of Teshuvah, Teshuvah has to do with doing a sin. Thus, simply speaking, the righteous don't experience Teshuvah. How much more so when the Talmud tells us that what is the infinite power of Teshuvah? The Talmud in Yuma tells us that Avrohom said that great is the Baal Tshuva, that in the place where the Baal Tshuva, in the realm where the Baal Tshuva lives, even the greatest tzaddik, the complete tzaddik, tzaddik gamur, cannot reach. Not he doesn't practically, he can't even potentially. Why? The reason why is very simple. The reason why is because the power of the Baal Teshuvah is to take pure evil, intentional sins, and transform them into merits. A tzaddik can't do that. Let's be practical. Let's talk about it for a moment. There are people who weren't born religious, or they were born religious and they made a little detour, and they ate shrimp. Now, how do we elevate food? We elevate food by using it for Torah and mitzvot. However, if you eat shrimp and you study Torah, you can't elevate it. Because in the true definition of the word asur, which means prohibited, really means tied down. How do you call a prisoner in Hebrew? Asir. He's locked in. Thus, if someone wants to go ahead and say, listen, I have no energy. I have no energy, but I want to learn Torah. So I'm going to go to Burger King. I'm going to buy myself a Big Mac. And I'm going to eat. I'm going to come back. Oh, am I going to learn? The learning is learning, and the pork is pork. It's that simple. The pork doesn't become elevated. You're not allowed to make a bracha on something that's not kosher. Thus, number one, the tzaddik never touches pork. So how does the tzaddik elevate pork? At best, the tzaddik neutralizes pork by not allowing evil to interfere with his service of God. So he's neutralizing it, but he's not transforming it. What happens with a Baal Teshuvah? Comes along a person who ate shrimp for 10 years, and then starts learning about God, and all of a sudden starts learning about what it means to keep kosher, and on the spiritual level, what it means that food becomes your blood and flesh, and there's a piece of you right now that's not kosher, and that causes an incredible remorse and regret, and that propels you into unprecedented commitment to God. See what just happened? That pork brought you to unprecedented yearning for closeness with God. That's what it means that an intentional sin is transformed through teshuvah. A tzaddik doesn't have that. A tzaddik has the Torah study from above to below. A tzaddik has the mitzvah observance from below to above. But what he doesn't have is teshuvah. He won't have teshuvah until Mashiach comes. Also tzaddikayu. That's what Mashiach's going to come. He's going to come to bring tzaddikayu l'tiyufta. He's going to bring the tzaddik to the experience of teshuvah. Now let me ask you, what is the power of teshuvah? So let's talk about this, right? How do we start this whole class? We started the class by explaining that the reason why we have complexity and lack of inner peace and inner struggle and confusion and pain and torn in different ways. Shabbos I want to be a tzaddik. Sunday I want to be a beach pig. Monday I want to be a millionaire. We have all this stuff going on in us. Why? So we explained because from its very source of genetics. We started with the infinite light, the expression of the infinite light. In the expression, the infinite and the finite. And then from there, lower and lower and lower. Supernal crown is circular versus linear, right? That means that in the light, let me talk about this. Creation as we know it, we refer to the infinite light. In the infinite light, there is absolute definition and separation between what's good and what's evil. What's good is good and what's evil is evil. Do you know something very interesting? It's not in my notes, but as I'm talking, do you know that once a person dies, he can't do teshuvah? The process from evil to goodness is through Gehenna, through hell. But if a second before the person dies, he does true teshuvah, boom. Not only is it wiped away, but the sins are transformed to mitzvahs. This is a true story, by the way. Rabbi Luvabitcher went over to the town Ganev, and he told him, the thief, and he told him, I envy you. He says, Rebbe, come on, please. I know what I do for a living, but don't envy me. He said, no, I really mean it. Because I'm limited in my relationship to God. If you can get yourself to do teshuvah, you're going to reach spiritual heights that I can't reach. As holy as I am. Constantly walking Jacob's ladder of up and down and down and up. Torah study, mitzvah observance. But I'm limited. But if you, Ganev, he told him, if you do teshuvah, you're going to connect with what it says in Masechta Yuma. The infinite power of the Baal Teshuvah who transform intentional sins into merits. That Rabbi says that the Tzaddik Gamur, he can't, not he doesn't, he can't. It doesn't even exist within his potential to reach that level. Why? To understand this, we need to understand what is Teshuvah. The power of will I'm talking about God's will. The Torah is the definition of God's will. Ultimately speaking, before logic began, before the wisdom of God began, there was no definite that gefilte fish is kosher and lobster is treif. There wasn't. That's a choice of God. You think God couldn't say, look at my boys. All right, you know what? Forget it. We'll have the Chinese eat gefilte fish and my Yiddish kinderlach enjoy red lobster and stone crab. You think he couldn't have done that? He could have done that. Makes a difference to God. There is no definite God has to have this. God chooses to want this. Thus, in the will, good is good and evil is evil. And from good to evil is further than from north to south and east to west. In the light. Now let's talk about in the master of the will. Not the will. The master of the will. Not in the infinite light where everything already has definition. How about in the source of the infinite light? I just shared with you. God could have made lobster kosher and gefilte fish treif. Thus, in the infinite light, there is no tolerance, capacity, empowerment for teshuvah. You connect it to evil, and evil is evil. You can't transform evil into goodness. You just can't. Because in the infinite light, they're all defined experiences with the infinite distance in between. However, once you connect with the master of the will, once you look up to God and you don't say, my king, you talk to God, my father. I don't want to connect with just your infinite paradise, which has definition. I yearn to be one with you. When you talk to the master of the will, then light and darkness coexist. There is no specific force definition. Oh, you ate gefilte fish, you're connected to me. Oh, you spoke Lashon Hara, you're just not connected to me. Don't you see? You can't connect to me. That exists in the light. Because the light defines what is light and what is darkness. But in the source, there is no definition. In the source, He is everything and everything is He. You know what that means? You think God's any more a piece of gefilte fish than He's a piece of lobster? Let me say it to you the other way. You think a gefilte fish is a piece of God any more than a lobster is a piece of God? Who exactly created the lobster? And what is the lobster created out of, if not the utterance of God? The same utterance that created fish. So teshuvah doesn't connect me just to the Torah. It connects me to the author of the Torah. It doesn't connect me just to the light. It connects me to the source of the light. It doesn't connect me just to the will of God. It connects me to the master of the will. Now we understand why teshuvah is the prerequisite for masim tovim. What does the word tovim mean? We know the word tovim means good. But in the true Kabbalah, do you know what that means? The human being can serve God, do goodness, because he emotionally feels it. You will have some people that feel for the poor children in Africa. You'll have another person, he doesn't feel for the kids in Africa, but she's going to take a public picture naked to protest the mink fur. And then you can have another one that's going to fight for the whales. In the will, in the human mind and heart, we are defined. Everyone has what they feel for. What is the process of teshuvah in the human being? It's reaching beyond what I feel for, beyond what I understand, going to my core essence. Do you know what that means practically? What it means practically is that Jewish people do not have humanitarian causes. Israel did not fly in to help Saudi Arabia because it's humanitarian. Because on a humanitarian level, I don't know how humane that is. To go ahead and feed and rebuild the enemy who sworn to obliterate you, that's not humane. Jewish people do not have humane causes, period. Jewish people have divine causes. I'll save a life of any human being because it's the divine thing to do. When the Egyptians were drowning in the Red Sea, in the Sea of Reeds, and the angels started singing praise, God said to the angels, silence! My creatures are being eradicated and you're singing? Which creatures were being eradicated? The ones that smashed the skulls of young Jewish infants? Is that what Hashem was so worried about? Yes. When you do teshuvah, your ma'asim become ma'asim tovim. Because without teshuvah, without getting beyond the light, without getting beyond what my mind understands and what it doesn't understand, what my heart feels and what it doesn't feel, what I have a soft spot for and what I don't have a soft spot for. Rather, when it's all about the Hineni Hashem, I am yours because of our essence of our soul is a piece of you. And thus when I go to save someone, whether it be a Jew in New York, or whether it be a black person in Cambodia, or whether it be a Muslim out in Saudi Arabia, the Jewish Hadassah Hospital is filled with Muslims and Arabs, not just Muslim, Christian Arabs, that you ask yourself, are you serious? Are you serious? You're trying to save the life of the murderer? And many of us as Jews, we're bothered by this. Oh, those leftist liberals. It's not leftists, not liberals. It's the children of Avrohom. Avrohom prayed for Sodom, and Israel saves the Arabs who sneak into our borders with ill intentions. Why? Because Jews don't have humanitarian causes. Humanitarian causes does not have masim tovim. They have masim, but not masim tovim. They have human, egocentric, feely, lovey actions. But get one of these liberals, and I don't say it negatively. I'm not saying I'm not a liberal or not. I'm not here to discuss politics. It's bad enough I discuss religion, right? So let's leave politics out of the story. But what I'm trying to say is, you get someone who's going to fight the cause and just push it a little bit beyond their comfort zone. Oh no. Oh no. Because it's humanitarian. Humanitarian has the limits of light. There's light and there's darkness. And sorry, darkness, there's nothing I can do for you. And when I perceive the black hatters throwing stones as darkness, I don't want to help them. And when I perceive the settlers, the Jewish settlers, as the epitome of war and anti-peace, I don't want to say I don't want to help them. But I will help everyone else in the Gaza. I'm being facetious not because I'm playing politics. I just want to make it so clear what it means that without total surrender of teshuvah, where I'm giving up the right to define humanitarian causes because I am a product of divine causes. If I can't do that, it's not masim tovim. It's masim, commendable masim, but not kabbalistically defined as masim tovim, because masim tovim means godly deeds. Godly deeds comes only with the prerequisite of teshuvah. Thus, we now understand what the double letters and the double strength is. The double strength is not that I'm doing both, studying Torah from above to below, and doing masim mitzvot observance from below to above. That's two singular measurements. What makes it double strength, i.e. infinite unity, where the two antithetical, paradoxical forms become one and the same, is when I let go of humanitarian drives and embrace divine drives. And thus, without teshuvah, you don't have ma'asim tovim. And thus, you now understand, there's the journey of studying Torah. There's the journey of doing mitzvot. But if I don't first do teshuvah, if I don't crack through the ego of self and make it about God, then they're not ma'asim tovim. Now you understand why when we look for the third journey, the bilateral journey, where it makes no difference whether I'm going up or down. It makes no difference whether I'm studying Torah or I'm helping a Jew in the street or I'm helping another poor person, a homeless person who's not Jewish. What makes it all one and the same is when we first do teshuvah. Oh, you're doing teshuvah. So it's not about you. It's about God. You're getting out of the linear self. You're going into the infinite circular He, capital H. Now we're talking Masim Tovim. That's the exponential, unprecedented oneness of double strength. And thus the two journeys are ultimately one and the same, and each one breeds the other. Okay. Now you understand why when Mashiach comes, where the ultimate reward of God is not that He allows us to connect with the light, but He allows us to become one with Him. The tzaddik can't do that yet, because the tzaddik never tasted the infinite yearning and remorse of the soul. You know, sometimes, more than sometimes, love isn't felt until you're losing it. So too, the Baal Teshuvah has an experience of oneness with God that the tzaddik doesn't have. Because the tzaddik doesn't know what it means to hit rock bottom with coldness, loneliness, and a yearning to disconnect and die. There's an unbelievable line in lyrics of a non-Jewish song. Cancel my subscription to the resurrection. Can you imagine how cold and lonely and detached a person has to be? I'm done. Please, just when I die, don't even wake me back up when Mashiach comes. I'm done. I'm so done. Let me go. If you don't feel that rock bottom of, oh my God, I just did the unthinkable as a Jew, as a human being, as a son of God, if I cannot experience that depth of infinite remorse, then ultimately speaking, I can't connect to the essence, the master of the will. A tzaddik doesn't need the master of the will to live. He's doing very fine with the light. The sinner, you and I, are only chances that the master of the will says, hey, Will, leave him alone. He's my boy. He's my girl. He's connecting with me. Forget the rules I put into you. I'll be personally dealing with this one. Thus, before the Baal Teshuva can, before the tzaddik can experience that, when Mashiach comes, he has to first be brought to Teshuvah. What we say before, everything of the reward has to happen through the action. Thus, Mashiach is going to do the tzaddik a favor, allow him to feel what the Baal Teshuva felt when we were living here in exile. Now you can connect with the master of the will. Let's close this up. Oh. So it's all wonderful, it's all spiritual. But I started off by telling you that this is about simple, physical, setting goals, reading books of self-improvement, trying to figure out how to get off the poverty line and get into success and health and happiness and everything. You know, it's all beautiful and spiritual, don't get me wrong, but let's make it really practical. So I will share with you. I am not a dancer, practically speaking. However, I am a dancer in my mind, heart, and soul. And my three daughters fluctuate between utter horror and amusement when they see me by red lights starting to dance behind the steering wheel. I'm going to tap into that part of me for a moment to talk about the moonwalk. What is the moonwalk? The moonwalk is where you're portraying movements of the legs going forward and you're really going backwards. What would that dance demand of you? What it would demand of you is stop focusing on the direction you're moving in. Get beyond that definition of space. Am I moving forward or am I moving backwards? Because most people, when they try to do the moonwalk and you see them getting all trippy over their feet, it's because their mind is struggling. It's almost like an artist. One of the first things when drawing that you have a problem is drawing a three-dimensional desk. Because your mind knows that the legs are equal, but your artist knows if you don't draw the back legs shorter, you're not going to get the perception of depth. So when the person, the dancer, is focusing, okay, I'm moving forward, I'm moving backwards, I'm moving forward, I'm going backwards, he's going to trip over his feet. At some point, you've got to let go of the focus of direction of movement, whether it be forward or backward. Yes, every dance is built upon precise practice of specific feet movement. However, the ecstasy of a dance is built upon letting go of thinking of finite, specific directions. You know, the Spanish, they have ole, which really I understand. I think actually Dauphine told me this, really comes from the Arabic influence on Spain. It really has to do from Allah. It has to do with a spiritual dimension. You can tell when a person has left the linear control of mindful, conscious movement of legs into the ecstasy of experience, and the subconscious is controlling the leg movement. There is a moment where a dancer or a singer, and I'm not here to start out with the dead, Michael Jackson, may he be in rock and roll heaven, but I do want to share with you that as an entertainer, there is a side of the entertainer that is manipulating his audience. That's the linear. But then there's a part where a true dancer, a true entertainer, a true singer is able to step out of self and experience something far greater. That's what a moonwalk is. Spiritually speaking, it is. It's not whether I'm going to manipulate. I like learning Torah. I don't like doing mitzvahs. So I just won't be available when they need us to help deliver packages to the hospital. I'll show up to the shiur. I won't answer the phone because I know the rabbi's right now looking for a Hanukkah gift in the hospital. I don't do that. That's manipulation. There's manipulation of spirituality. I do this mitzvah because I actually saw in one of the holy books that this mitzvah is a good luck charm to get rich. That mitzvah is a mitzvah, but it's not going to make me rich. I'll just be unavailable. It's a manipulation, forward, backwards. I'm manipulating my audience. God. But then there's the ole experience, where you truly let go of self. It's where you leave the humanitarian and go into the divine. It's where ma'asim become ma'asim tovim. This is not practical yet. Let's get really practical. I'm not here to teach dancing. Every successful person that I've ever read up on, and I'm not talking about those who are financially successful but are wrecked inside out, with their family life, their children's life, their personal life, drugs. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a true successful person. Every successful person will tell you that the prerequisite of success is that you've got to love what you're doing. You could be making a lot of money out of this, but you don't love what you're doing, you're not going to enter into the paradoxical moonwalk, which is letting go of linear self and experiencing circular power. I want to share with you that very often you don't experience this until you've had failure, the teshuvah perspective. You know why? Because when I try to do something and I fail again and again and again, what's the one question I have to ask myself? Why am I still doing this? That actually is the very fertile place for me to decide I am doing this for no other reason that at my core essence, this is who I am. This is where I feel alive. This is where I have fulfillment. That is the teshuvah before the ma'asim tovim. That's what kept Avrohom so intimate. Whether he's going through the hunger, whether he had to put his wife in a box, whether he was wealthy, whether he had to break up with his brother-in-law / nephew, whether he had to go to war. No, all these different experiences, the Lech and the Lecha and the Lecha and the Lech, it was in a different dimension for him. Because Avram was doing what he loved to do. And that is to speak about God. To be a living manifestation on this world of what godliness means. Thus, I want to go back to you practically speaking. If you're kvetching about what you're doing, oh, don't get me wrong, I'm grateful to have a job. I'm grateful to have an office to hang my hat in. But if I'm not experiencing the teshuvah before the ma'asim tovim, if I'm not experiencing the absolute surrender that it doesn't make a difference. I do this because it's who I am. It's what I do. It's where I become alive. I had a migraine headache and it's gone. How did it become gone? Because when I do this, I have left time and space. When you can leave time and space, Lech Lecha becomes one beautiful experience of movement. Thus I share with you, whatever you're going to do to make a living, let go and dance, dance, dance. The moonwalk. Thank you.